This material is made available to you by or on behalf of the University of Melbourne under Section 113P of the Copyright Act 1968. It may be subject to copyright. For more information, visit the University Copyright website.
Angle of F max is related to corner frequencies. So you can have a look.
Because I know that the location is related to the corner frequency.
Also the amount.
The magnitude.
Yes.
Okay.
So imagine if the corner frequencies are at the same point, there is no lead or lag. Lead or lag.
Okay.
Because they cancel.
Okay.
Exactly, right?
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. All right, good morning everyone. So this is the last lecture on compensation. Tomorrow we will just cover some robustness results, which I skipped because I wanted to cover all the compensation so you can still have time to complete your labs. So this lecture is in some sense combining lead and lag. I mean, it's obvious. And it's much more powerful technique than any of the techniques we considered earlier. So for some tricky plans, you can achieve much more demanding sets of specifications by using lead lag compensation. All right. So first, I will just present an overview. I will remind you what transfer function and the body diagram for lead lag compensator is. And then we will go through steps of a design. By the way, I slightly changed one slide in this lecture and I uploaded it in LMS. So if you have old version of lectures, they've changed slightly. So you will see, when I get to that point, I will point it out. At the end, we will just present a few extra tricks that you can use when doing frequency domain design, which would apply across the board, so lead lag or lead lag compensation. So, we will just summarize properties of different compensators. I highly recommend book by Ogata for this because it's rather sort of clearly written step by step. And all these comparisons are there and maybe even more, right? So there's actually more details in Ogata. So if you really want to learn all the tricks, I highly recommend that book. All right, so first the overview. So we saw in previous lectures, a couple of lectures ago, that lead lag. I mean, in some books it's called lag lead. Actually, so because lag comes first and then lead, like you will see if you go along the frequencies. So the transfer function looks like this. The parameters you can play with are k, the gain of the compensator, and then all the corner frequencies which are related to tau z1, tau z2, tau p1, and tau p2. And we use this sort of relationships between lead part and lag part. By the way, since corner frequencies are the inverses of these taus, then the lag part would be in the lower frequency range, and lead part would be corner frequencies will be in the higher frequency range, right? Because we have these inverses. 1 over tau z1 is corner frequency corresponding to that 0, right? Etc. So this is a combination. It's obviously a combination of lag and lead compensators, right? You can actually use all sorts of other combinations. You can have lead, lag, lead, or different combinations. With what we are covering now, you will have enough idea of how to use these tools, and if you go through a lot of examples, you will be more able to do it creatively. I think when it comes to solving problems, you will need to be creative sometimes. All right. So this is what the body diagrams look like, and this is what I was telling you. You see, the lag part comes first in the lower frequency range, and then you have the lead part. So this is the phase, and this is the gain of this compensator. By the way, here it's assumed that k is equal to 1. If we assume that k is larger than 1, then the magnitude plot would shift up, whereas phase plot stays the same. And if k is smaller than 1, then the magnitude plot will go down, whereas the phase stays the same. So obviously this is now another Lego block that we can play with, and the question is, when can this be useful? So what we will do in today's lecture is present an example where this sort of compensator can be, used to satisfy some set of very demanding, tricky specifications for a given plant. By the way, sometimes this gain at infinity, you see there is so it starts from 0, but then it ends up at this 20 log tau z1, tau z2, etc. So often this gain is chosen again to be 0 to infinity. I mean, but we have more flexibility. It doesn't have to be, sorry. So it starts at 0, but it ends up at infinity at a hard point. That's how this picture was drawn. It can finish lower or at 0, right? So that's the degree of freedom that you can also play with, right? So, PID control, it can be considered as a special case, and we covered this also in previous lectures. If we write a transfer function in this manner, so in that case, lag compensation pole is placed at 0, lead compensator pole placed at infinity. You can rewrite this transfer function in this way, and you can then, it's more clear that you do have proportional, integral, and differential actions. So you still have these same parameters to play with. K, tau z1, tau z2 are the parameters that you can play with. Okay, so tuning PID controllers can be done in frequency domain. We won't do that, but lead lag that we are covering in this lecture is very similar, right? So what you can do with PID. There are examples in Franklin's book that I highly recommend. Ogata uses a slightly different parameterization. So you saw in previous lectures that we did use different parameterizations, coming from, let's say, different books. So I will use this parameterization in this lecture. So note that here we do have this tau T1 and T2, but then we are assuming that we would scale the difference between pole and 0 for the lead and lag portions with the same constant beta. This is a more restrictive parameterization than what I presented earlier. So this parameterization here is more restrictive than this parameterization where we have tau z1, tau z2, etc. These guys are all free, whereas I'm sort of insisting that they are related in a particular way in the other parameterization. Now this is simply restricting a little bit, but then design steps are sometimes more straightforward. So either one of these can be used, and different books use different parameterization. We will use this one in this book. So it has less degrees of freedom, but it simplifies the design steps in some cases. And this is what Ogata uses. All right. So now we want to go through an example. So we first reminded ourselves what lead lag compensator looks like, what its features are, and now we can. One thing I forgot to perhaps ask you. You see, we are using here lag at lower frequencies, lead at higher frequencies. This is sort of consistent with the fact that a lag at lower frequencies typically won't hurt us so much, whereas we might need lead at higher frequencies. This is quite consistent with two different examples we did over two last lectures. In one lecture, we were just using lag, we didn't have any lead, right? And then in another lecture, we only had lead, we didn't have lag. But this, the idea of having the phase characteristic for lead lag in this way is consistent with both of those examples that we considered earlier, right? Okay, so here is the problem description. So we are considering this plant. We do assume here that K in the plant can be, again, tuned. And we want to design lead lag compensators so that the velocity constant is 10 seconds, inner seconds, so PM phase margin is 50 degrees, larger than 50 degrees, and gain margin is larger than 10 decibels. This is exactly example 993 in Ogata, right? In later editions of Ogata. I first want to remind you what velocity constant is. So it's limit S times C of S G0 of S. So where C is the compensator transfer function and G0 is the plant transfer function. So what we will do here is, so by the way, why is this velocity constant interesting? Well, it's directly related to steady state errors with respect to ramp inputs, right? So if you have a large velocity constant kV, then steady state error with respect to ramp inputs would be small. So this is just why we want to, so specifying what velocity constant should be is the same as saying what you want to achieve with steady state errors with respect to ramp inputs. Okay. All right. So just going back, we want to satisfy KV10, phase margin larger than 50, gain margin larger than 10 decibels. So since we can adjust the plant gain, so K, we will assume in this example that we will set the controller gain to 1. Right? So because we will have still ability to play with the plant gain. So we will set DC controller gain to be exactly a 1 for this reason. So now we want to choose plant gain K so that we achieve desired velocity constant. So what is the velocity constant? We just write everything out. So we get basically that from the definition of velocity constants is basically K divided by this, which is actually K half. So we are letting S to 0. So in other words, we now have a relationship between K and KV. So if we set K to be 20, which is the plant gain, we achieve velocity constant of 10. So that's the first step. I just remind you the plant transfer function is given here. So what we are doing here, we are playing with K. We are assuming the compensator transfer function to be like this, right? So note when I let S equal to 0, this will go 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 to 0. All of this will tend to 1 as S goes to 0. So the only thing that's left is KC, but we assume KC1. That's why when we took these limits here, you know, we got, so everything from the compensator is just KC, right? But that's 1 by assumption. And then what we are left with is just K over half, as we let S go to 0. Everyone following? Yeah? Yeah.
Is the equivalent K for the step?
Can you repeat that?
Equivalent to the KB for the step for the unit step.
We use KP, position constant, so we used that in the previous lectures. Whenever I used KP, that was the position constant. So 1 over 1 plus KP was the steady state error with respect to step inputs. This is related to the ramp inputs. Sometimes your problem formulation may be given in terms of KP or in terms of steady state error with respect to, you know, step inputs. It's the same because they are related. Yeah. Yes. Yes. I mean, I'm using this example also to define what KV is and to relate it to the steady state error with respect to ramp impulse, right? Okay, so the first step was sort of done. We know now what the gain should be. So note that an interesting thing is here, since we assumed that the controller gain is 1, then we can play now with locations of poles and zeros without affecting KV, right? So that would be we are sort of separating design so that we address one specification at a time. So in this way, we won't basically touch gain of the controller, of the compensator, so we will preserve this velocity constant, which is one specification done, okay? So what we do next is we plot the body plot for k equal 20. By the way, when you go through Ogata, I want to emphasize this now, Ogata uses asymptotes to calculate things, whereas I'm here using MATLAB plots, but then I'm using the same ideas as what Ogata presents. So that's why my numbers won't be the same as Ogata's numbers, because he's working with approximations of the magnitude plots, whereas I'm working with the exact plots that MATLAB gave me. So don't be confused by that. What we are looking after here is a procedure anyway, so but don't be confused by numbers. All right? So we now plot body plot for this we can say pre-compensated plant. We chose the gain for the plant, and we chose the gain for the controller to be 1, right? So now if you see what is, so this is like an open loop, right? Body plot. Gain margin is negative, phase margin is negative. Note that the plant is open loop stable. So negative phase margin means system is unstable, right? Because the open loop transfer function is stable, Nyquist says we should not encircle the critical point, but then phase margin negative and gain margin negative tell us that we actually do encircle the critical. So we are unstable. So what we are doing next is we look at the whole plot, and we sort of need to decide. So by the way, I want to remind you what the specifications are. So the specifications are that we should get phase margin more than 50 degrees, and that we should get gain margin more than 10 decibels. But in our case, phase margin is negative and gain margin is negative, right? So we need to work quite a bit hard to get these guys to be positive and above these lower bounds. Yeah. So we need to basically lift phase margin by 78 degrees, right? And we need to improve gain margin by 20 decibels roughly, right? To achieve what we set out in specifications. So where do we read out the phase margin? Well, at the crossover frequency, right? Here, note that because at the crossover frequency, we actually have here phases, smaller, larger than 180 degrees, minus 180 degrees. That's why phase margin is negative. If it was above, it would be positive, right? So we need to now sort of decide. And by the way, where do we read gain margin? Right? So at the point where we cross minus 180 degrees. So because the gain is positive, right, the gain margin is actually negative, right? Because look, this point here is the point where we cross negative real axis in the Nyquist plot, right? So well, since at the phase minus 180 degrees, we have that the gain is larger than 1, because positive gain in decibels means the gain is larger than 1 in the, it means we encircle the critical point. Right? And since the system is stable, so open loop stable, that is basically telling us that the closed loop system would be unstable. All right. So what we need basically, we really want to, in some sense, well, we need to increase the phase margin and gauge margin. So we need to fix this stuff that's happening around in this region. So the first thing that Ogata suggests is you need to pick where you want the frequency of the compensated system to be. So you need to select where you want frequency of the compensated system to be. So he's suggesting, well, let's pick it at this point, exactly at the point where the uncompensated plot crosses phase crosses minus 180 degrees. So he's saying, let me pick this frequency at 1.5 to be frequency that I would like to enforce through compensated design to be the crossover frequency for the compensated plot, which means that the gain should cross 0, the gain characteristic should cross 0 at that frequency. So I'm trying to achieve that for the compensated plot. Okay. So by the way, just by looking at this picture and by thinking about what the body diagram of the lead lag compensator looks like, right? Well, you can see that we will be able to, well, we will add some amount of lag at low frequencies, but we saw in our plant we have plenty of frequency to spare in low frequency range. So that won't, if we place these corner frequencies for the lag in the right points, we won't destabilize the system. Or I mean, the system is unstable, but we won't make more damage. But then, we need to select these guys, corner frequencies, so that when we add this to the other plot, we enforce the new crossover frequency at 1.5. That is the goal. So obviously there is a bit of sort of art, in picking these corner frequencies to ensure this and also satisfy all our specifications, right? We need to provide quite a bit of phase margin and gain margin, all right? So phase margin more than 50 and gain margin more than 10. So that's quite demanding in this example. All right, so the first step was, all right, so in this case, the frequency at which we cross minus 180 degrees is 1.5. Ogata suggests we'll pick this frequency to be new crossover frequency for the compensated system. We are trying to enforce this. Okay. So we need to contribute at least 50 degrees at this frequency, 50 degrees of leap. Does that make sense? Because the frequency of the uncompensated phase margin of this, so if we enforce this crossover, right? If we play it with a gain, right, so that this is a new crossover, that would lead to 0 phase margin. So we need to provide at least 50 degrees because our specifications tell us that we need to have 50 degrees at this frequency. By the way, this is very, very important. Other design choices are possible. At the end of the day, you just need to pick the corner frequencies of the lead lag, place them in the particular places, and if you miraculously get the specification satisfied, everyone is happy. But Ogata just gives you some guidelines of how to do it step by step. There's some sort of logic behind these steps. All right, so what we do is we pick the corner frequency that corresponds to the 0 of the lag compensator to be 1 decade below the desired crossover. So since we said desired crossover is 1.5. That's what we want to achieve. We set out to achieve this. Then I will put the corner frequency, which is 1 over T2. That's the corner frequency for the lag part. I'm placing it at 1 decade below. So 0.15 is radius per second is what I need to achieve. And then, you know, as we need to provide amount of phase at least 50 degrees, we will use this relationship to say, well, let's, you know, say we need to calculate now beta. Beta comes from the parametrization of the compensator. I just want to remind you. So I'm using these parameterizations. So I'm calculating, so I picked T2. Right? I said quarter frequency for the 0 should be 1 decade below the desired crossover. And now I'm saying, okay, what's happening with the phase, right? So I will pick beta in a particular way. This is now all consistent with Ogata. Everything we're doing, you will find in Ogata. And then, you know, the phi max will be 54.9. Now this might seem strange. So this might seem strange that we are talking about lead, because we are saying we want to provide this much lead at the new desired crossover. But note that the compensator is parameterized so that both lead and lag use the same parameter. So the amount of lag that I will have at low frequencies will be actually exactly the same as the amount of lead at higher frequencies, right? Because the beta is the same. So what I'm doing in the next step, I'm actually determining how much lead I will be providing with the lead component, because beta is the same. This is where this parameterization simplified design. So what I'm saying is, first I looked at T2, right? And then I'm looking at beta, but beta, which is related to the lead, because I'm saying I want to provide this much lead. But as soon as I determine how much lead I would need, that determines also the location of the pole of the lag part of the compensator, because I use the same beta. So that's the sort of logic. So by the way, I will put these two quarter frequencies far to the low frequency range, and then I would like this bump to be exactly at the place where my new desired crossover frequency is. So first I was sort of deciding where do I put these quarter frequencies, right? So in particular I decided this quarter frequency due to the 0 of the lag part. And then I'm deciding, okay, how much lead I need in the desired crossover frequency range. Because I parameterized my compensator with the same parameter beta, then once I determine the amount of lead I need, my location of the pole for the lag part is fixed. So that's what's happening basically here. So we first determine the T2, that's the location of the corner frequency for the lag, and then we are determining beta, but that's how much lead we would need in the lead part. And then, you know, it turns out that if you pick beta to be around 10, that would provide around 55 degrees. And obviously we would like to place the frequency where lead gives you this amount of margin around the desired crossover frequency that we want to achieve, exactly in that spot. Because at that spot, right now, the plant has 0 phase margin, and we were asked to provide at least 50 degrees, right? So we now, since we have one quarter frequency already, then we get the other quarter frequency for the lag part. So that's even that's even smaller frequency. So beta is 10, T2 is what it was 0. So 1 over T2 was 0.15. So we divide 0.15 by 10. So we get this. So hence the lag part of the compensator is given by this. So now note at the desired frequency we have that the desired frequency is 1.5. So what we are looking now at is the plant gain. So at the desired frequency is 1.5 radians per second. And that frequency gain of the uncompensated plot is 9.37. So what we want to do in order to ensure that this is truly a new crossover frequency, we need to basically have that the compensator gain at that frequency is the negative 9.37. Because compensator gain and plant gain would add at that frequency and they will collapse into zero, and that would then be enforced as the crossover frequency. So now Ogata presents steps on how to achieve this. He uses asymptotes to figure out, so now we are figuring out, by the way, I just want to go back to the compensator properties. So we first assume the compensator gain is 1, right? And then we said corner frequencies were calculated from those previous steps. Corner frequencies for the lag part. We now need to, so these guys are determined, the gain is 1, and now we need to figure out these two guys. Corner frequencies for these guys. How we would do that? We will place one corner frequency of the lead compensator on the left-hand side of the desired crossover, and the other one on the right-hand side. Why is that? Because I want this bump of the lead to be exactly at the place where new crossover frequency will be. Does that make sense? Lots of confused. So I will ask questions. So I can repeat it, but let's see whether someone is brave enough to ask a question. No questions, but lots of confused faces. So, all right. Let me repeat this maybe differently. All right. So what we are doing here. Sorry. Let's go here. I can explain everything already here. So what we are doing here is we plotted this plot, and we achieved with this plot already the velocity constant. If we manage to stabilize the system, if we don't change any gain characteristics of this plot, for low frequencies, then we are good in terms of velocity constant. So by choosing compensator gain to be equal to 1, then we are fine. We can now play with zeros and poles of the compensator, and we will still satisfy the velocity constant constraint. Now, we want to place the lag compensator corner frequency somewhere here, because this lag here would not affect negatively the phase margin and gain margin, which we need to address here. But the effect of the lag would be that the corner frequency, the crossover frequency of this pre-compensated system. Imagine that you only have lag. Then the effect of placing corner frequencies of lag here is exactly as in previous lecture. It would move the crossover frequency of the compensated system to the left. So that would already help us to sort of help us with stabilization of the system and getting more phase and gain margins. All right. So, but now, if we place crossover frequencies of the lead part here, basically around this point. So I'm choosing this frequency to be my new crossover. I want to achieve this as a crossover frequency. So I want a compensated plot to cross 0, at this frequency. So how would I achieve that? Well, you know, I need to make sure that the gain of the compensator at this frequency is negative of the planned gain. So the planned gain is 9.37. The compensator gain at this frequency has to be minus 9.37, right? Then I will ensure this frequency. And then, in order to provide lead at this frequency, then the bump, the largest lead that the compensator provides, should be placed so that the largest bump is exactly at this new crossover. How would I achieve that? I will pick one corner frequency for the lead part on the left of that point, and another frequency, corner frequency of the lead on the other side, so that this bump occurs exactly at a desired crossover. So now I want to design the lead part. I want to pick the corner frequencies with the lead so that I do two things. I want to achieve that this frequency 1.5 is really the new crossover, and I want to pick corner frequency so that I get the maximum amount of lead at this frequency. Right? So two things, right? So now this is what Ogata suggests. So here are the steps. So this looks like a busy picture, but I will explain what he does. So what he's doing here, he's saying, let me first, so I know this black box is exactly the place at, where on the magnitude plot at omega equal 1.5. So that's the magnitude of the plant, right, at the desired crossover frequency. So he's saying, take a point, now take this red dot, red box. So you choose this red box to be negative of the plant gain at that frequency. So this red box is drawn at the same frequency, but it's the negative gain. So you want your compensator gain to really pass through this point. So how Ogata does it, he doesn't plot exactly what MATLAB would give you, he just plots asymptotes of the compensator. What are the asymptotes? I just want to remind you. The asymptotes are these sort of thin black lines. So Ogata works with these thin black lines because it's a piecewise linear approximation of the magnitude plot. And this is easier to work with. So what he's now constructing, he wants to construct this slope here. This black line from this corner frequency to that corner frequency, right? So that's what Ogata is constructing now. So he's first saying, well, I know at a certain frequency where I want this line to pass, right? I want this line to pass exactly through that red box for the reasons I described. And the only question now is, where do I pick these corners? Where do I pick these corners? Well, I will pick these corners so that this bump exactly occurs at the new crossover frequency, right? So that's why one of these corners would be on the left of that crossover frequency and the other one would be on the right, because this amount of bump happens in the middle. Yeah? So I see more people nodding, that's good. Hard work pays off. All right, so what Ogata is suggesting, well, plot this black box, which is exactly negative of the gain at the same frequency, draw a line at 20 decibels per decade. Why is that? Well, that's the asymptote of the lead that we are plotting now. It's at 20 decibels per decade. So now he's saying, well, choose the corner frequencies at the points where this sloped line intersects minus 20 decibels and 0. So these are the new corner frequencies for the lead. That's the suggestion. That's the suggested sort of design. So he's working only with asymptotes, and with this, you know, roughly you see that. By the way, this is logarithmic scale. So this is sort of, you know, roughly, you know, in the middle. So you will hope that the lead would provide amount of phase which is largest at that frequency, so you actually stabilize the system and provides enough phase margin. Okay. So, okay, with all this said, you can find from this sort of, analysis that, corner frequencies for the lead should be 0.7 and 7. By the way, desired crossover is 1.5. It's in the middle, right? It's in between, right? So, and this is the lead part of the compensator. And now the complete lead lag design is given by this. So what we need to do is we plot body plot. So this is the blue plot is the pre-compensated system with k equal 20 that satisfies velocity constant. And note that the compensator gain is 0 for low frequencies. That does not affect velocity constant, so we are good. Our initial, one of the specification is done. So now we need to add these two gain plots and these two phase plots to really figure out what are the gain margin and phase margin. I told you it's essential that you learn how to add two plots when they are given to you. So how do we calculate the crossover frequency? Well, we look at the spot where the red gain and blue gain are the same amplitude but opposite patterns. So that's exactly this spot. So, and then at this spot you need to add this and this phase curves. That would give you the amount of phase margin, right? Because the phase of the plant was 0 at this place, then the only thing that would give you the phase margin is the compensated plot. Yeah.
Because the corner frequency of the lag compensator is far away from the gutter frequency, right? So what's the difference between only the lead compensator and lag lead compensator?
Yeah, so good question. So remember that we had a negative 28 degrees of phase margin, and we were asked to provide more than 50 of phase margin. So doing it with a single lead, you can't do that. You could have done with two leads. What we are using here, lag is helping us by moving the crossover frequency to the left. So that will help a little bit with providing some phase. And then we would also add one lead compensator that provides some extra phase. By the way, lead compensator would provide about 54 degrees of phase. I told you don't use more than 60 degrees per lead part, or don't try to use multiple ones, right? So here we are combining. We could have used two leads. I told you there are infinitely many correct solutions, right? I'm just showing you here. Okay, I chose this Lego block, lead lag, and in this case, that's how you proceed with design, right? If you wanted to choose two leads, you could have probably achieved the same thing. It's a very good question. There is lots of flexibility, guys, right? So, by the way, when you do this, this is what you get. So, the phase margin is, by the way, note, the crossover frequency we were aiming for was 1.5. Once we did everything, we end up with 1.1. Why? Because we always play with one diagram while ignoring the other. But whatever we do for one would affect the other. That's why, things would change. In the end, you need to check that you get the right amount of phase margin. So phase margin is 55. We wanted 50. Gain margin 60 decibels. We wanted 10 at least. Done. We're done. Right. So if you didn't achieve all the specs, then you will need to iterate. How do you iterate? Well, you need to rethink whether the positions of corner frequencies for the lag and lead were in the right spots. Right. So putting lag further to the left is one possibility. Lead, stretching a little bit lead, or placing the corner frequencies at a slightly different spot could do a job. If it turns out to be too difficult, you might say, well, let me use two leads, right, instead of one lead. Right? So you can sort of reach a point where you say, okay, I don't know how to do it. I mean, with the given compensator, but I will just use something else. By the way, typically in exam situation, I can't give you. I would love to be able to give you such questions, but I can't, given the time is a problem, right? 3 hours. So you would be typically given much simpler sort of tasks. But you have to be very sort of versatile in using these tools. So the questions would be designed so that they test your understanding. But you won't have to plot a lot of things, right? Like what we are doing here in lectures, right? But you will be asked so put it this way, you will be tested for knowledge, but you would be given tasks that are doable within 3 hours. So definitely, right? So just to finish this example, if you now find what closed loop poles and zeros look like, you can see that there are these zeros. So this 0.6 and pole, sorry, there's a minus there, you see, sorry. So there would be like pole zero cancellations. I think there is a minus missing. I'll just check in Ogata, sorry about that. But definitely this pole here and that zero there is sort of an almost pole zero cancellation. And note that they are both very close to imaginary axis. Because they are very close to imaginary axis, there would be a slow response due to that pole. It's almost like a cancellation, but if you plot the step response, you will get this slowly decaying tail. So this is a typical sort of outcome of an almost pole zero cancellation. So where pole is slow, right? Because this thing, pole is slow, so it's close to imaginary axis, it will slowly decay. So the part of the step response corresponding to that pole will slowly decay. That's why you see this long tail there. Right. By the way, depending on an application, this might be fine or it might not be fine. You might, if you find that, that this is unacceptable for your application, you might have to repeat the design. In this case, our specifications didn't tell us what's the settling time, right? We didn't bother with settling time, right? But this is the outcome of design, which you are advised to check what happens with step response, what happens with all the sensitivity functions, etc. If you look at ramp response, so you can see that steady state error is reduced and is bounded to ramp signals, and this was ensured through our velocity constant being 10, right? We wanted velocity constant 10. So 1 divided by 10 would be the steady state error with respect to ramps, and that's consistent with the simulation here. All right, we have a few more minutes left. I just want to give you a few more hints of what you could do when you're doing design. If the plant has a pole or zero that are sort of undesirable, so for instance very slow, you can use pre-compensator that first cancels this undesirable pole zero, and then do the lead lag compensation. Typically, you are canceling stable, poles, right? You're not canceling unstable poles this way. So don't use this technique to cancel unstable pole zeros, because it's never possible to do it exactly anyway, right? There's always a difference between the model and the plant. And ignoring unstable poles and zeros could have really bad effect on the overall outcome of design. So if you have also poorly damped poles, so for instance, they are very close to imaginary axis in their complex conjugate, they are poorly damped, right? Then you can again use this sort of pre-compensator. Franklin has a very nice, by the way, Franklin has in the last chapter of his book case studies where he uses realistic problems, like he uses an aircraft, where he uses like real problems, real models like of real problems, and then he goes through several different designs. He tries one design, then he might end up with another design. He says, well, this design didn't work, let me use another design. He uses techniques from both advanced control and control. So he may use root locus, he may use frequency domain design, but you see in those case studies exactly how you're supposed to use these tools. right? So I really recommend the last chapter of Franklin. It's a very good reference for this. All right, so just last one, last couple of slides. So lead versus lag. So lead compensator achieves desired results through merits of his phase lead contribution, and lag achieves his merits through attenuation from, at low frequencies. Lead-lag compensator combine benefits of both. So this is just one slide where we summarize everything that we mentioned many times. Pros of lead: improve stability margins. It does provide high crossover frequency and high bandwidth. Higher crossover is good for rise time, settling time, so the system is faster. Faster system, these are the pros. Cons are, in some cases, high bandwidth may not be desirable if you have lots of noise, because your system might start trying to track that noise. So if you have lots of noise, then keeping the bandwidth low would guard you against noise amplification by your system, right? It also lead usually requires additional gain, which means larger actuators. When we talk about gain mathematically, that means actually you need to spend more money to buy a larger motor. That's what it means, right? So you have to be careful about that. It also typically also produces larger control signals, which might saturate actuator and lead to instability. I gave you an example of that aircraft that crashed due to saturations, right? Lag, it can improve DC gain and reduce steady-state errors. It may improve phase margin by reducing the gain at higher frequencies, but high frequency noise may be attenuated without reducing the DC gain. And then, typically leads to lower crossover frequency, lower bandwidth, so slower response. And then you may typically you would have this long tail because you have pole and zero that are very close to each other. So in transient step responses. And then, lead lag has all of these sort of benefits combined, right? All right. This is all. So just one thing. All of this is sort of one set of tools. There are examples where it's much easier to use tools from advanced control systems. So if you want to do advanced control next year, I will talk about optimal control. You're talking about best control among all possible controllers, how to choose the best control. So Franklin beautifully gives you examples of how to use control system tools or advanced control system tools. He doesn't make any distinction between them because you shouldn't. It's not like one subject, you just do one thing, another subject, you're just learning tools. And this case studies chapter at the end of Franklin is really good in that sense. All right, so what we did today, we presented lead-lag compensation. We can change the process procedure, right, to achieve similar result or same result. There's lots of flexibility, design flexibility, and different choices. We also showed a few extra tricks and compared different compensators. So that's all. I will see you tomorrow. We don't have time for questions because there's the next lecture starting. But I will see you tomorrow. Thanks for that. Just a quick one. I'm running to another meeting. Let's take it outside because.
越过奥斯北应该是靠那一块吧。
你